Today we will learn about one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people from the 20th century. I have chosen the designer Coco Chanel from artists and entertainment category. Chanel created fashion that offered the feeling of luxury in a simple, understated yet elegant way. She mixed the look of male and female clothing, and her taste and sense of style overlap with today's fashion. During two distinct periods, the 1920s and the 1950s, she created styles, fabrics, and clothing that became part of the language of fashion. Her boyish hat creations were in stark contrast to the styles that were in vogue at the time. Chanel had a sharp mind, and it is apparent in everything she did, from her savvy use of logos to her deep understanding of the power of personality in packaging, and she always was quotable. It is fitting that Chanel was often photographed holding a cigarette or standing in front of her famous Art Deco wall of mirrors. Fashion tends to involve a good dose of smoke and mirrors. Chanel was a ward of the state at age 17 after her mother died and father ran off. She initially stayed with nuns in an orphanage. The young woman left there as a seamstress and became a cabaret singer. She then became the mistress of a playboy who would finance her move to Paris and the opening of her first hat business. After that, she moved on to his friend Arthur Capel, who is said to have been the love of her life and who backed her expansion from hats to clothes. Throughout the 20s, Chanel's social and professional progress continued to eventually become the status of legend. Here, her work actually had many phases, including the little black dress that made her famous. But probably the single element that most ensured Chanel being remembered is not her clothing, but her perfume. Chanel number 5, in its Art Deco bottle, launched in 1923, and it was the first perfume to bear a designer's name. With all of this, Chanel's reputation wasn't always stellar. During World War II, she responded to the war by shutting down her fashion business and hooking up with a Nazi officer where they resided in her beloved Ritz Hotel. Years later, in 1954, when she decided to make a comeback, her name still had disgrace attached to it. Chanel's return to the fashion world launched the Chanel suit, which was met with huge success. In Europe, her return to fashion was considered a flop at first, but Americans couldn't buy her suits fast enough. By the time Katharine Hepburn played her on Broadway in 1969, Chanel had achieved first name recognition and was simply Coco.